So by this event we opened the 25th Jožo Stefan Days. This is a week of the Jožo Stefan. He was born on 24th of March. So every year this week is dedicated to Jožo Stefan. We organized 1 to 2 events every day. Right after your presentation there will be the opening of the exhibition. So the goal is to open our doors for the public, inside and outside, because also inside is important because our youngsters can hear what in other labs are doing. They can visit other labs. Actually, they are obliged to visit other labs, especially on Saturday. And as I said, our first speaker is my friend, the rector of the University of Trieste, Professor Maurizio Vermeglia. I will just give a few data about your scientific life. Professor Vermeglia finished his laurea in chemical engineering at the University of Trieste in many years ago. I don't know. I don't say. He's my age, exactly my age. He was researcher also at Denmark Technical University in one period, and then he began to work again at the University of Trieste in 80s, where he became also a full professor. He was one few years he was director of the department and president of the Council of the Scientific Structures, and then president of the doctorate school in nanotechnology. He was selected director at the university in 2013, and in his as a professor he also collaborated with the University of Padua, or Padova in Italiano. He is member of the European Federation of Chemical Engineers and other important associations such as International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, American Institute of Chemical Engineering, and many also national organizations. His research interests are in multi-scale modeling and material design, applied thermodynamics, simulation of processes, simulation of molecules, nanotechnology, and nanomedicine. One of his program guidelines, I read this, as a rector, was to create a high-level research university, which is very tough these days. And may I say, he lives in Dolina pri Trstu, so he doesn't live in Trieste, right? Dolina pri Trstu, which is considered a Slovenian village, I don't know.
Sure, absolutely. Yep, I'm part of it.
Just, you know, if you go to Sucerp, just if you look down from Sucerp, you can see him maybe downstairs in the valley. So, thank you very much for coming. The floor is yours, and enjoy the lecture.
Thank you. Thank you, Jadran. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted, really delighted to be here, and I'm really honored to have received this invitation from Jadran. I will tell you a little bit about my recent experiences, mainly not mine, because you probably can understand that being a president or rector of a university in the last 3 years, I only manage problems with my colleagues, basically. But I could at least do some meetings with my groups of PhD students and colleagues and postdoc in order to continue my journey through scientific development. As you can see from this slide here, my topic is multi-scale molecular modeling, and I'm going to try to convince you that this topic is really, let's say, multidisciplinary, transversal with respect to many fields. I started myself. I am a chemical engineer. I know nobody's perfect, but anyway, I am a chemical engineer. So I started from the, let's say, the material science and processes, but soon I understood that there are some topics such as thermodynamics, transport properties, molecular dynamics, chemistry, basically chemistry, that may applicable to many other topics and many other situations, such as, for example, biology and nanomedicine. So I will try to accompany you in this journey through modeling applied to several different fields. I love to start my talks by indicating this, which is the Technology Vision 2020, in which you actually see down here that the computational molecular science is among the computational technology, enabling technology for a new chemical science and engineering technology. This is old, as a couple of years ago, sketch. What I would like to stress here is that there are, of course, other computational technology engineering, such as process simulation, optimization, large-scale integration, CFD, but the first one is this, and there is no alphabetical order in that. So I love to think, or to convince myself and you that this is going to be probably one of the most important tools for the future in this vision of technology, science, and society that will surely change our world. It will change our world, and because actually we are going to, well, we already enter in a new revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, where smart automation is coming into play. It's called Industry 4.0, or it's called in different ways. But the most important point is that we are facing a cyber-physical system. That is, a digitalization is coming deeply into the play, into the market, and is going to change the way we produce goods, we produce products, but also we give services to the market. I try to convince you that there is a very tight relationship between modeling big data and this way of looking at industry, new way of looking at industry, even though, at least in Italy, we are a little behind others in this respect. But probably one of the most relevant issue in thinking and in investigating multi-scale modeling is this. This is, I mean, some books on nanotechnology and nanoscale science and engineering. Those are taken by Mikhail Rocco. Rocco is the responsible, let's put it in this way, of the National Nanotechnology Initiative in US that started already in the previous millennium. And among other different suggestions on nanotechnology, I love to look at this one, where is clearly reported how TMS stands for Theory, Modeling, and Simulation, is expected to play an extraordinary role in nanoscale science and technology. If you are interested in this, I strongly suggest you to refer to this and other publications, even though they are not that updated, they're still rather important. So what's happening in the nano world? We can always, looking from a very, very high level and not going into the details, we can identify some, let's say, periods in generation of products and processes in nanotechnology. The first is the past, is the so-called passive nanostructures, the first generation products, in which people and scientists develop the materials, basically, with no activity, or let's say with the this distribution of nano objects inside, for example, plastics, polymers or ceramics, having a particular nanostructure. From passive nanostructures, we moved slightly into active nanostructures, where we started to talk about actuators, structures, adaptive structures, when we started to deal with auto-assembling or self-assembling systems. But active nanostructures are still small, and that was the limitation of active nanostructures. We entered recently, some years ago, into the so-called nanosystems, where we are working much more on in terms of self-assembly nanostructures. And now we are in the field of the molecular nanosystems. And nanosystems, we are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you actually see that if the system is getting bigger, it's much more difficult to simulate it with the power of a computer. And it's necessary to resort to much higher computer power or to some algorithm. This is actually one of the points I will touch later on. What's next in nanotech? A converging of all technologies. Nano, bio, info, from nanoscale will combine knowledge, will combine activities, and will produce new, totally, completely new products and new processes. I have extracted from this publication here the 12 global trends to 2020 regarding nanotechnology, and I just have elaborated a little bit in bold, those somehow related to the topic I'm going to talk about today. And you see that the first issue here is theory, modeling, and simulation, 1,000 faster essential design. Then the third one is a shift from passive to active nanostructure, nanosystem. And in here you need some tools for designing these active nanostructures. Penetration of nanotechnology in industry, same thing. Industry needs design tools, mostly computer-based design tools. More predictive nano health environment sciences with integrating nanobio and environment. And again, the system is getting bigger. And personalized nanomedicine from monitoring to treatment. The last part of my talk, I will tell you a little bit about theragnostics, which is a combination of therapeutics and diagnostics, which again is addressing the particular fields. But yeah, so what should we do, or shall we all do? We need to have some efficient way to design nanostructures. And the design of a nanostructure is complex because there are very many issues that one has to consider: processing, structure, chemistry, biology. And well, time is such that there's no more the possibility to use the trial and error methodology, because you may have to choose among 1,000 of different formulations for using more or less the same ingredients for that recipe. It's very interesting, though, that following this idea, in 2013, these three gentlemen received the Nobel Prize for the development of multi-scale models for complex chemical systems. And this is exactly what they have pointed out exactly to the point. I mean, we need to be able to simulate complex system using a multi-scale approach. Why multi-scale? But simply because we will all love probably to use Schrödinger equation for simulating the bumper of Toyota. That's, in principle, should be possible, but we all know that that's impossible in terms of computational power. So this is it. I mean, just to set the scene. But to set the scene, one ingredient is missing, and that's the MGI, Materials Genome Initiative, that probably some of you have already heard. That was the former President Obama bet for transferring the approach of human genome to the material genome. The basic idea is to combine, and you have this small schema here, to combine computational tools with experimental tools with big data. The idea is, well, suppose probably you have run or you have seen results coming from a synchrotron or from an NMR or from some complex analysis like that. The synchrotron is able to generate millions of data per day. And, but if you have to check 1,000 different systems, it's going to be tough to do all the experiments on all 1,000 systems. So the idea is to combine scientific computing, that is simulation with experiments, and store all this amount of data in a big data, which we have now available. We have a possibility to do that. And the information which are useful for the design of new processes and new products will come from business analytics, analytical tools, statistical tools that will extract information from data. So that's the basic idea of Materials Genome Initiative. Do we have a future for this? The future is here, and is related to the role that GPU, graphical processor units, has had, and is having, and will have in this respect. This graph, even though it's a little bit old, a couple of years old, it's, in my opinion, extremely interesting because this was prepared by an engineer. It's not only for that. But if you look at the two, you see here you have three lines. That's the high-performance computing number one. This is the average 500. And this is the performance of a GPU, single CPU, and this is a GPU. In terms of what? And this is what you have in the x-axis is the here. In the y-axis, you have two quantities. The first one is the molecular complexity, which is the number of time steps times the number of atoms simulated in one day. This is particularly important for industries. When I try to convince industries to finance a project on molecular multi-scale modeling, normally they say, okay, but when do I get the result? And they are sensible to results, computer results obtained over coffee, over lunch, and overnight. If I try to tell them that it will take a couple of months to get the result of molecular dynamics, they simply say to me, and you are thinking that we in the industry will run a computer for 2 months to get a number? Are you crazy? So it's really important that we can demonstrate that we can get something reasonable also in one day. And the other one, which is the other y-axis, is the simple atom simulation. That was for a very simple monoatomic fluid. That is the number of atoms that can be simulated for 10 nanoseconds in one day. And you see that the numbers are pretty interesting. Considering that all these numbers has grown in the last 3 years and will grow basically linearly, if not exponentially, we can tackle complex problem. But there is another thing that this graph is showing, and it's the performance of GPU. GPU is the graphical processor units that was developed for our kids, basically, and for the computer graphics and for computer games. Is made up by an enormous amount of parallel CPUs, small CPUs, in which it's not important the clock of each CPU, but it's important the number of parallel CPUs. And this is a particularly interesting benchmark from using LAMMPS. LAMMPS is one of the software mostly used in this respect. And you see here these graphs. You see the performance of the CPU in red, which basically doesn't scale with the number of atoms. It remains more or less the same. But if you take the best, let's say, combination of GPU with a particular algorithm, with CUDA in this particular case, and you see this violet curve here, and you see that the performance that's measured in terms of millions of atom time steps per second grows very much with the dimension of the system. So this means that GPU is exactly the technological solution for this for tackling this complex system. GPU is not the solution for quantum chemistry, of course, because that's a completely different way of approaching. There is a completely different way of writing codes. What EU is doing in this? EU is doing well. There is last year, EU within Horizon 2020 created some centers of excellence. The list of centers of excellence, you have them here. And the objective is to strengthen in Europe the already existing leadership in high-performance computing, covering area of application, impact, impact, impact. This is what EU is asking us. Material modeling, molecular atomistic modeling, climate change, global system, energy, and especially developed tools. I was asked to develop tools or some, let's say, add-on to open source software in the area of APG and the area of big data. Again, you see a convergence of big data and high-performance computing going towards the same direction. And all agrees that the impact of GPU here is central and is essential. So after this, let's say, introduction and motivation, let's put it in this way, I would probably try to satisfy your curiosity about what the hell is this multi-scale molecular modeling. Well, this is something very, very simple. Basically, it's the idea that there doesn't exist one single tool that is able to simulate a complex system with a very wide characteristic length and a very wide characteristic time. So what you have to do is to resort on tools which are already available and then combine this in a sort of message passing information from one step to another of this ladder. We all know, or as well, this is well known, how to go from quantum mechanics, quantum chemistry to atomistic simulation, molecular dynamics, or Monte Carlo, and well, you develop a force field at quantum level, and then you apply that force field at molecular dynamics level. Fine. The point that was, let's say, tackled only some 20 years ago was, okay, but how can we bridge what we can do at a molecular dynamics level with what engineers are desire to have, which is the finite element simulation, Abacus, COMSOL, and all that kind of software which are, of course, very much used in industry. And this is the area of mesoscale modeling. That is, again, a way of passing information from one scale to another, and I will comment a little bit in more details in a moment. We have, in our group, developed a simulation algorithm and also software in the last, I shouldn't say how many years, because it's more than 20 years we work on this field, and we have applied this to self-assembly, let's say, nanostructures around a gold nanoparticle, to the evaluation of surface tension of different fluids when they are in contact with a nanostructure surface, or to estimate Young modules and mechanical properties of a nanocomposite, or even understand conductivity, electrical conductivity of dispersion of carbon nanotubes in plastics, or understanding how nanoparticles are located in a diblock copolymer system, or even try to predict the maximum load of drag in a reverse micelle that is compatible with not destroying the micelle, but also something much more applied. This is a project we had with BASF on the prediction of aggregation and dispersion of silicon nanoparticles in a polymer, and also the possibility of smuggling DNA fragment into the cell in order to let's say, contribute to the genic therapies. And also the possibility of designing hybrid organic-inorganic complex system. So this is what some of the activity we have done, and you see that we span from pure chemistry to physics to biosystem to nanomedicine. I will tell you a little bit more about these examples and this example and this example later on. I told you about the interaction between computation and experiments. I think this is really crucial. This probably comes from my education as an engineer, so I always would like to compare my results, theoretical results, with some experiments. The good news is, you see, you can really recognize here the ladder, the one I showed you before, different methodology. And you see that I'm not an expert, actually, I'm a theoretician. But so far, we may have a characterization technique which may cover each of these stairs of the ladder. So this means that we can check the results of our simulation with some particular property as we go on to the engineering design, even when no dynamic information is available. And this is, in my opinion, quite important. It's not the case that we at the University of Trieste have a very, very strong, my group, a very strong collaboration with synchrotron and with the organic chemistry department for synthesis, characterization, and simulation. That was the introduction. I will tell you a little bit about the mapping procedure. Very brief, because I don't want to bother you with equations. I have to show some equation, otherwise you'll say, this is not an engineer. It's something else, it's a philosopher, I don't know. But anyway, the point here is how we go from atoms to beads. Beads is an agglomeration of atoms, which is the minimum, let's say, the smallest entity that we use for simulating the system at mesoscale. Well, what we do is simply we group molecules in a particular way, and here we don't have some definitive information from the theory. This grouping should be done based on some assumption, and then we use any mesoscale method. The one we have focused more is the dissipative particle dynamics, which is a soft potential calculation. Equations are very simple. That's the force field. It's made up, then you simply apply Newton's equation of motion, no problem with that. And the force field is made up by three contributions: a conservative part, which is a system dependent, a dissipative part, which is basically a frictional force, representing the resistance, the viscous resistance, and a random stochastic part, which has something to do with temperature. To do this, you need two information. One is interaction in the conservative part. It's a sort of Flory-Huggins interaction. And the second is the architecture. So how big are the beads, how they are composed, which is the chain architecture. Because actually here we are simulating carbon nanotubes, polymers, drugs, anything. So in case of polymers, of course, you need one more information, that is the rigidity of the connection between the beads. The idea here is to simulate what happens in a complex system. This is molecular dynamics, where every atom or molecule interacts with all the other atoms within a given region. The idea is to have just a simple interaction, much smaller, and linear with respect to the distance. This means, physically speaking, that all degrees of freedom pertaining to the lower scales are simply equilibrated, and we just don't care what's happening within each bit, but we just care how beads are moving and interacting, and what will be the nanostructure at the end of the simulation. I told you that to do this, we need some information. The first information is the architecture, the mobilities of the bead, which has something to do with the self-diffusion of the beads, and the effective Flory-Huggins interaction. The theory that we developed, well, in the past, the effective Flory-Huggins was try and error again. You see, okay, let's try, let's see what happens. We have some results, and so on and so forth. But our idea is to develop the Flory-Huggins interactions, the extended Flory-Huggins interaction, directly from molecular dynamics, and therefore containing all the information coming from quantum chemistry of unreactive system. So what we do is we simply start with the MD simulation, define all the beads, and obtain density profiles from molecular dynamics. This is a snapshot of what you can actually get. This is a polymer, this is a compatibilizer, and this is the solid interface. You actually see that there is actually a density profile. As density is low here, it's much higher here, it's much, much higher here. So, having obtained this density profile, which is supposed to be correct, because we have used a force field, which is correct, we move to the dissipative particle dynamics, and I don't want to go into the details, but we define two parameters, intercept and slope of that linear relationship I showed you before, and calculate the parameters of the DPD and calculate the density profiles from DPD, which probably, at the very first attempt, will not match with the density profile of molecular dynamics. This is repeated until we get almost perfect or reasonable overlapping of the two density profiles, and then we fix the relationship for the DPD parameters. And this is actually the results. You see here the performance of the algorithm in which the density profiles are compared, those coming from molecular dynamics and those coming from dissipative particle dynamics. The question you are now thinking, why the hell all this The answer is because what we want to get here is just the structure, the nanostructure. We need to know exactly in each single point of the nanostructure which is the density and why the density is such a number. Is due to the nano-object dispersion, is due to the polymer, is due to the interface, is due to what? So it's absolutely important for the calculation of the properties that will follow to have the nanostructures correct. Second question you probably ask, mesoscale simulation is able to estimate properties? No. Mesoscale simulation is just estimating structures. In order to get a property, we need to go to the finite element. And finite element, based on the nanostructure, will give us the property. And this is actually what we have to do next. From dissipative particle dynamics, which is a soft potential calculation, much faster than MD, we need to, again, regroup. This is a concept of coarse graining, basically. We coarse grain a group of beads, and we transfer this information to the micro-finite element simulation in order to calculate what? Applying Laplace equation, this is the realm of engineers. Applying Laplace equation, we can calculate electrical conductivity, diffusion, permeability, and applying a local deformation, also mechanical properties may be calculated. We have some small problems here due to the size of the system. The simplest way for matching a finite element with the result of mesoscale is to use the so-called fixed grid approach. That is, okay, we take the results and we transfer it to the finite element. But if we have a platelet of montmorillonite, which is 300 nanometers large and 2 nanometers thick, that means that I have to simulate a system of several hundred nanometers at mesoscale, which is not possible. So we have to resort on a different approach, which is the so-called variable grid approach. And this is typical for nanocomposites, in which the grid is not fixed, is variable, and is large when there is no nano object included, and is much, much thicker, very close to the interface, so that we can take into account correctly what really happens at the interface, and some nano object, which is responsible of the final properties, are not sort of jumped over if the grid is too big. This is much more demanding in terms of computer time, but it's the only way to solve the problem. Again, I don't want to bother you too much, but also the properties and the nanostructure at the interface may be studied using this procedure, and we can simulate the nanostructure of a so-called core shell nanoparticles independently on the number of shells, so maybe 1, 2, or 3 different shells. And at the end, we end up with this nano object, in this case a spherical, but maybe also different size. As you can clearly see in this graph, there's a big computational recipe underneath all this, which so far is implemented, let's say, in-house. We are working. We had one Horizon 20 FP7 project that is finishing in these days, and we have another Horizon 2020 project in which, together with software company, we are trying to put all this recipe together, construct connectors to the open source code, so that in 3 years from now, hopefully, someone will deliver this as a product that is done this sort of automatically. And this part is from atomistic to mesoscale, and this part is from mesoscale to finite element. So the final idea is to give this to the industry, and so that they will allow to do this, to run this simulation over coffee, no, over lunch, perhaps, overnight, more reasonably. Couple of weeks, fine. So let's have a look at some applications. I have just selected some of them. Perhaps I will jump over some because I would love to leave some room for discussion. The first is what happened when we have functionalized nanoparticles in nanostructured polymer matrices. The first example, this is an old paper by some Korean scientists. They found out that when you have a lamellar structure in a diblock copolymers, depending of the, let's say, how the nanoparticle is covered, is grafted, the nanoparticle will go to the center of the domain or to the interface of the two domains. There is a fantastic potential application here for optoelectronic industries and for electronic industries, because you may be able to create nanowires at a very, very thin level. So the idea is, okay, can we repeat these experiments, this data, using our approach in simulation? Answer, yes, it is possible, and it's actually more evident probably here, where you have the distribution of the center of mass of the two lamellas, or the two polymers making the lamellas, and this in black down here is the distribution of center of mass of the nanoparticle. And here you can actually see that the maximum here corresponds always to the maximum of one of the two polymers making up the diblock copolymers. And the distribution of the nanoparticles are quite okay. This is in the case of full covering kind A or full covering kind B. Naturally, if the covering of the nanoparticle is, and therefore the grafting system is different, what happens? It happens that the maximum of the nanoparticle corresponds to the interface. So it's possible, well, we have demonstrated that it's possible by simulating the grafting to obtain exactly what we want. And this is an important information to industries in order to create and synthesize the grafting nanoparticles is not an easy task. I mean, if there are some chemists here, knows what I mean. And of course, it's possible also to play a little bit around with the different concentration of nanoparticles and understand, for example, what happens if the loading of nanoparticles is too big. And you actually see this is a simulation, and agglomeration is evident here, which is exactly the same. This is a TEM or SEM or anyway, like a electron microscope indication. So after this, we switched to another system. The system was, that's much more recently, was the selective placement of magnetic nanoparticles in diblock copolymer films. Again, very much important for industries. And here we wanted to understand what happened when the solvent is vaporized, that's solvent vapor annealing, and in terms of the structure of the polymer, I mean the diblock copolymer, but also as the location of the nanoparticles. To make a very long story short, the first thing to do is to be sure that the lamellar structure and the broken lamellar structure is correctly simulated. These are simulation. These are AFM imaging. And then the point is, okay, what happens if we disperse magnetic nanoparticles? And you actually see that the placement of this nanoparticle has a satisfactory and selective dispersion up to a concentration of about 5 weight%, but less is better. And the cluster formation are of the dimension of nanoparticle units. And again, this is a simulation, and this is the experiments, which shows, with a little bit of fantasy, that actually this agglomeration of nanoparticles happens. The second example, staying in the realm of material science, is again functionalized nanoparticles is in unstructured polymer matrices. This is a project, 3 years and more, project we have done with BASF, with CRP, which is Fiat, with Bosch and other partners, Jülich and others, in which we simply wanted to see the effect of grafted nanoparticles and semi-crystalline polymers. The core is a silica, 5 to 10 nanometers. There is a linker, of course, and the grafted polymer chains are polystyrene from 2K to 20K. That was very, let's say, interesting for BASF, because they really wanted to know how long should be the best grafted chain and which should be the best grafted density with respect to obtaining a perfect dispersion of the nanoparticles. Okay, we started from the simulation point of view with a carved sphere. We etched it and grafted the sphere, simulating the grafted chains, and this is actually the single nanoparticle simulation. The polymer, I mean the system, the bulk of the polymer is just polystyrene. Then we performed in different groups multi-scale modeling, true multi-scale modeling. The first one was done in the group of Doros Theodorou in Greece, and that's simply a single nanoparticles Monte Carlo simulation in order to understand perfectly the size and shape of the grafted chain. Very basic. Then our friends Florian Müller-Platte in Germany, they performed molecular dynamics and coarse-grained molecular dynamics coming from the results of this and transferring to here. And they get this nice picture of what is really happening at molecular dynamics level for a single particle. Then we moved all this to DPD. DPD 1-to-1 means we try to repeat exactly the same situation obtained in MD by using dissipative particle dynamic on a single on a single nanoparticle. Then we extended this to more than one, and then we extended it to infinite, high number of nanoparticles, which is the industrial system. Believe it or not, the results we obtain in terms of modeling are perfectly comparable with the experiments obtained here. You see different concentration, different grafting density, and this is the simulation. These are the experiments, the characterization, and you see that you have dispersion and you have aggregation exactly in the same ranges. That's the concentration and grafting density, and then we also played a little bit with the chain length, and again you see that from aggregation you move to dispersion if the chain length is getting bigger. And this is actually quite counterintuitive, because one should probably say if the chain length is small, we will have a perfect dispersion. That's not the case. If the chain length is small, probably the interaction between nanoparticle and nanoparticle is not screened enough, and therefore there are a tendency of aggregation. Having done this, since we have the nanostructure, we can, let's say, look at the mechanical properties, because that is what BASF was interested in. And you see also that the results are not that bad. In parentheses, the experimental value, which is quite in agreement with the simulation. The last example, I will move in bio, because this is actually where we concentrated our efforts in the last 2 or 3 years. And specifically, I will tell you a little bit self-assembly organization on nanoparticles and multivalent self-assembly building blocks in nanoparticles. The idea here is that there are several systems for biomedical application in the range from 1 to 1,000 nanometers, as some of them are well known, and we have investigated almost all of them. Recently, we started to work a little bit with the MRI, the magnetic resonance imaging, because it provides advantages for diagnostic imaging. But the problem is the sensitivity. Some of you have had the unlucky situation of being in an NMR testing, then you know that you have to stay into the machine for several minutes, which is a little bit disturbing. MRI should need a contrast system, a contrast fluid, and recently fluorinated nanoparticles have enabled specific detection of fluorine 19 nuclei-based NMR. We started a project in which we decided first, can we prepare gold nanoparticles with carbon and fluorine in a controlled way? Then, of course, in order for this nanoparticle to be recognized by the human body, need to be Pegaside, and that is, we need to just add some polyethylene glycol at the end of the chains in order to smuggle what it is inside. And then we wanted to know whether there is an effect of nanostructure on NMR. And the rest of the project is still ongoing, so I won't tell you that much about pegization, cellular uptake, and cytotoxicity. But the first point is that we developed gold nanoparticles with particular grafted chains. This is a particularly complex system because you have to simulate also the water with ions around, and because that's what really happens. And this is a structure of the different grafted chain on the gold nanoparticle. This particular, as you can see in this particular structure, there are stripes. But there are also other structures, such as Janus nanoparticles, in which you have half and half, let's say. You know Janus, the old god. You get stripe-like patterns and domains, or even random, completely random. So, having found out that this is possible, and all these nanoparticles, grafted nanoparticles, is possible to synthesize, then we decided to play a little bit, following also a paper published in Science by Stellacci, about the effect of these gold nanoparticles in an NMR. And we simply decided to use different lengths, different equal length and branched ligands. The idea is, actually following some papers of Stellacci, is that if you look at the NMR spectrum, the morphology is the most important responsible for the different spectra. You see the chemical shift of NMR versus a ligand composition for a completely random system. This is just linear. If you have a system like that, which is basically a Janus nanoparticle, you have a response like this, which is a sort of logarithmic response. And if you have another system, such as this, which is this one, you have a much more complex with some inflection point and so on and so forth. So you have the random, you have the Janus, and you have the random, the Janus, and the stripe-like. So, surprisingly enough, this is actually what we get from the experiments. These are the random, these are the Janus, and this is the other, the stripes-like. So, we have also compared this with the characterization, which are shown, well, again, with a little bit of fantasy, are shown here. But believe me that this is true. The last, and I will jump over very, very fast on this, is what about drug load in a reverse micelle? Is it better to have a diblock copolymer or a triblock copolymer? That was the question that we were asked by one pharmaceutical industry, and the drug that we should be included in the reverse micelles is this. This is a model drug, of course. The real drug I'm not allowed to show, but this is nifedipine. So the first thing to do was to estimate the diblock copolymer phase diagrams with all these fancy structures that are created in this case. And we actually succeeded. This is, in my opinion, a very long work by one postdoc and one PhD students. But you see that here we have developed sort of the theoretical simulation phase diagrams derived from the DPD simulation. Then we try to see whether this phase diagram corresponds to the reality and also is simulated correctly. And this is where this concentration in water versus the PLA fraction. And actually you see that several different structures are simulated correctly. But this is not of interest, of course, for the pharmaceutical industry, because these are not micelles. Micelles are up here. A zone with a different concentration, and micelles are really created and reasonably stable. And the point is, okay, now we load the micelles with a drug, and this is the maximum drug concentration is about 15%, a little more than 12%. More than 12%, more than 15%, the micelle collapse. And this is a very interesting indication for pharmaceutical industries. And then the original question was, is it better to have a diblock or a triblock? This is a result for a triblock, and the answer is absolutely not. A diblock copolymer is able to get inside and keep inside much more higher concentration of that particular drug. The very last example is the one I mentioned before, and it is somehow related to the theragnostics, which is a combination of therapeutics and diagnostic in the same way. And the basic idea is to have a nanoparticle that contains both the therapeutic agent and the diagnostic agent. The idea is that, well, fine, if we have to fight a cancer, we of course would like to reach the target, but we would like to just reach the target and not anything else. And we would like to know whether the target is reached. So we started to develop nanovectors for bioactive components, drug targeting, and control release. And this is actually the first example, the first, let's say, proof that we run on a computer, that is whether the nanovector is able to go across the cell membrane. Otherwise, the nanovector is good for nothing, and this is okay. And then we decided to create a self-assembly, you see, active nanostructure, a self-assembly of dendrons, which are this structure here, that they have a core, and they, by means of physical interaction, a ball is created, and you can see here how the ball is created. This ball has some functionalized atoms or groups here at the end, and this functional group are able to connect with the DNA, in this particular case, segment of RNA. And this is actually what happens, this is a simulation here, this is the fragment of DNA, and this is our dendron, the structure of these different parts. And you see that the dendron is connecting and is interacting and is sort of glued to the DNA. You should imagine, this is another example of simulation in which the DNA is condensed by the dendron using different functional groups. So DNA is condensed and reduced. Then you should imagine this completely surrounded by dendrons, and these have PEG or PEG in the outside, and it is possible to smuggle a drug, or sorry, not a drug in this case, is a fragment of DNA for the therapy, for the genetic therapy inside the target. And the target is here. Of course, there is a different pH inside the cell and outside the cell. And this also allows that once the entire ensemble is into the cell, it is automatically deassembled, and the segment is released to the target. And it's actually very interesting. Work is, of course, in progress in this, and we are collaborating with medical doctors, with hospitals, with pharmaceutical industries, because this is sort of the therapy and the diagnostic for the future. Conclusion. Well, I hope I passed the message of the multi-scale molecular modeling protocol. I showed you a little bit about the mapping procedure, even there is a lot of physics and chemistry to discuss, but this will be for another time, or for those of you that would like to know more about it. It's very useful for the design of systems, mainly for interpretation of experiments. I'm not the kind of person that say that I will simulate anything. There's no way. A comparison, a combination of experiments and simulation will be the future. We use the simulation as a virtual nanoscope in order to understand what happens and to give suggestion for the design of active nanomaterials and nanosystems. And this is applicable to different fields, from classical fields of automotive industry to pharmaceutical industry to nanomedicine. And what was also my surprise is that that's general design approach for nanostructural material and system. You know a little bit of biology, and you can use your education of chemical engineer, which is obvious. We don't know anything about biology, but it's still possible to do some interesting things for the future of humanity. Nano-bio-infotechnology will have, in the 21st century, the same importance that oil, polymers, and semiconductor had in the 20th century. This is not me that says this. There is this convergence of society needs, science, technology, impact to the society, complex system and computer power. All this will converge in an idea which is very similar to the materials genome initiative that I mentioned before. What is needed to do this? Basic competencies in physics, chemistry, biology, informatics. We are going to have a multidisciplinary approach. We already have a multidisciplinary approach. We need nano-characterization, nano-fabrication tools. And we all in this area are very happy that we have a synchrotron here, or it's not far from here, that everyone can use. I mean, people from Slovenia are using it and are most welcome to continue to use it. As you have understood, characterization and simulation, they go very, very, very close together. But also the development of high-performance computing and computational algorithms. And many, many scientific relationships. I'm here for that. And Jadran and I, we know that this is the only way to solve problems, to collaborate, and to maintain in each university, in each entity, very high quality research and technology application. I haven't done all this. Actually, I'm here just to report some other people's work, and you have just an idea of the acknowledgement. It would be too long to cite them all. I leave it here just in case you know some of these ladies and gentlemen who collaborated with me. And I thank you very much for your kind attention.